everybody, today we're going to be talking about whether it's the best to pay off your student loans as quickly as possible or whether or not it's better for you to slow pay your student loans. Hey everybody, I'm Wendy and I'm one half of the House of Five podcast. We are all about helping moms and dads on the road to financial independence save more, spend less, build wealth, and doing it all while living a joy-filled life. If you know our story, you know that a big part of our financial independence journey has been dealing with our debt. And a big part of that is our student loan debt. Together, my husband and I have about $350,000 worth of student loan debt. We both have a plan of how we're going to deal with that debt, and our strategies are different because our individual circumstances are different. And that's what this video is going to boil down to, is the answer to whether or not you should pay off your student loans quickly or slow pay them is going to depend on your specific circumstances. So we're going to be examining what those circumstances are, what you should take into consideration, and then ultimately what is going to influence your decision on whether or not you slow pay your student loans or not. Let me first talk about what it would mean to slow pay your student loans. What it means to slow pay your student loans is that you are paying the minimum amount possible through the terms of the loan for the longest possible time. Typically, this is based upon your income. So there's strategies that you can take to get that payment as low as possible for as long as possible. And there's reasons that that may be of a benefit to you. Now, if you're going to be paying off your loans early, of course, we're talking about the flip side of that. Paying as much as possible as you can on your student loans as often as possible. The end result being that you pay off your student loans more quickly, and it reduces the amount of interest that you'll pay on the loans over time, thereby saving you money. One of the very first things that you should do before making a decision about whether or not you want to pay off your student loans early is having a really honest look at your current financial circumstances. One of the most important things that you should look at before you consider paying off any loan early is whether or not you have an emergency fund. If you don't have an emergency fund currently, any extra funds that you have would be better served by making your emergency fund. An emergency fund is typically 3 to 6 months of your living expenses. And if you're self-employed or have irregular income, it's even a good idea to maybe have 12 months worth of expenses saved. Your emergency fund needs to be in a place where it can earn a little bit of interest, but also where you can access it easily if you needed to, but not so easily that you're tempted to draw on it for unnecessary expenses. Your emergency fund is your life vest. It is going to be there for you in the case where there's something like a job loss or maybe a catastrophic illness or other significant financial event or divorce. If you don't have an emergency fund, that should be your very, very first priority. Another factor that you should consider is whether or not you're currently contributing to your retirement. If you're not currently contributing to your retirement, especially if you're on the younger side, you have two of the best things on your side at the moment, and that is time and compound interest. And so if you're not contributing to your retirement currently, you should be putting aside as much as you can afford into your retirement plan. And if you don't have one through your employer, through an IRA. If you are with an employer that gives you an employee match, that's free money that's on the table, and you should at a minimum be contributing up to your employer match. Now, once you've checked off those two things, the other thing that you should be looking at is your overall debt situation. If you have high interest loans like credit cards or store loans or other items that are financed, you want to take a look at your interest rate and see what it is compared to what your student loans are. It's very helpful to do this on a spreadsheet or another tracker where you're listing your debts in order and you're looking at what has the highest balances and what has the highest interest rate. If you have other debt, it's really a good idea to pay off those things that have a higher interest rate first, because that's going to save you more money in the long run. The next thing that you want to look at after looking at your current financial circumstances is really considering what your financial goals are. We all have different financial goals for a variety of reasons. Some of us want to retire early. Some of us maybe want to pay off our home. Others maybe have children that they're looking forward to college and you want to help with their education. Not everyone's financial goals are going to be the same. And so when taking into consideration what your goals are, that is going to motivate what your priorities are, and whether or not those priorities take precedent over paying off your student loans early. Once you've examined where you are financially and you have a really good idea of what your financial goals are for the future, you can then begin to start making your plan of attack. Now, here are some of the reasons why it may benefit you to pay off your student loans early. The biggest reason, of course, is that it will cost you less. We're talking sometimes about really significant dollar amounts. So for instance, where my student loans are at about $250,000, even though my interest rate is really, really low, it's under 4%, that's still a hefty amount. And when we're talking about paying that over 20 to 25 years, it's a really, really significant dollar amount. A really helpful tool to help you in making this plan for your student loans is using the student loan calculators that are available on studentaid.gov. What I really love about these calculators is that you can plug in different scenarios. It also allows you to look at the different repayment plans that are offered under the student loan programs. These are going to tell you whether or not it's better for you to consolidate, whether you should go on an income-based repayment, the time frames for repayment, all of that good stuff. And it allows you to look at those numbers and decide which course of action is best for you. Another reason that you might want to consider paying off your student loans early is you know that you have other priorities coming in your future, such as maybe buying a home or some other large purchase, where if you pay off the student loans, it's going to improve your overall credit score and your credit file, particularly your debt to income ratio. Many times a mortgage lender specifically, is going to want your debt to income ratio to be below a certain point, typically about 35%. Sometimes they'll go up to 45%. It just really depends on the lender. And when you have these large student loans looming over your head, that of course is going to increase your debt to income ratio. So the more that you pay off on your student loans, the greater amount that you have available to spend on a mortgage, allowing you to afford more. So that might be another reason why it's better for you to focus on paying off your student loans first. The third reason why you might want to consider paying off your student loans early is that they're not federal loans or qualify for the student loan forgiveness programs. What's great about those programs is that they have criteria that allow you to pay on them over a lesser period of time, thereby saving you money. But not everybody qualifies under those. It's typically for people in public service type positions like teachers, police officers, firemen, etc. But if you have private loans, typically these don't qualify. And finally, the last reason that you may want to focus on paying off your student loans as quickly as possible is really down to comfort and less stress, especially if you're in a situation where you have a lot of student loans. That can be very, very stressful. And similarly to when people are motivated to pay off their mortgages early, it just gives them a sense of comfort and well-being and knowing that that debt is not out there looming over their heads. It may not always make the most financial sense for you to pay off your student loans early, but sometimes it is what gives us the most comfort, and that's important too. I shared with you a few moments ago that my husband's student loans and my student loans are being treated very differently. My husband is very fortunate in that he is an educator, and so he qualifies for the student loan forgiveness program, and we are in that program. We have confirmed and been certified and are making income-based payments on his student loans. And so as long as we continue to do that, as long as he remains employed as a teacher, we should have whatever the balance is after 10 years on his student loans forgiven, which is really, really great. It will save us a lot of money in the long run. His student loan balance is about $110,000, and that is for both his undergraduate and his master's program together. On the other hand, my student loans, even though they are all federal loans and would qualify for the public student loan forgiveness program, I am no longer employed in any sort of traditional means of employment. I've been self-employed for quite some time, and currently I am retired. I do not qualify for those programs, but additionally, we have opted to slow pay on my student loans. The main reason we have opted to slow pay our loans is that we have gone through all of the exercises that I discussed in the beginning. We looked at our financial situation currently, we looked at our financial goals, and we have actually sat down and run the numbers. And what makes the most sense for our family is to slow pay my student loans. After 20 years for your undergraduate student loans and 25 years for your postgraduate student loans, they will be forgiven. It isn't any special program. It's just the nature of having them through the federal government. So for us, what makes the most sense is to, number one, while our income is low, and we expect it to be low from here on out since I have retired, is keeping that payment as low as possible and paying it for as long as possible up to the point of them being forgiven. 20 years for the undergraduate portion of my student loans and 25 years for the graduate student loans. So some of the benefits to paying off your student loans slowly over time are some of the things that I just mentioned. It might be that you qualify for the student loan forgiveness programs. And so if that is the case, it benefits you to keep your payment as low as possible using the income-based guidelines that are provided, and then paying on those for 10 years, knowing that at the end of those 10 years that the balance will be forgiven. Now, keep in mind that whatever amount is forgiven is going to be counted as income for that year. So you also want to take that into consideration when you're factoring in the costs of whether or not it's a benefit. Another reason that we alluded to is that you may want to slow pay your student loans because your money will get put to better use in the market. We've been very fortunate, at least since 2009, that we've had really, really great returns in the market. It may not be that that ends up remaining the case. Things can change at any time with the market, but that again is going to be a decision for you to decide upon after you have run through the scenarios. It may be that keeping your student loan payments as low as possible is better served because you can then use that extra income to put into the market or retirement, etc., and have that money work for you better. And as we mentioned in the beginning of this video, it may be that you simply don't have the funds right now to pay more, or that you haven't done the other things that are a priority, like having your emergency fund funded or making sure that your consumer debt is paid off. If that's the case and your student loan interest rates are low, it really makes sense to pay as little as possible for as long as possible on those so that you can focus that money onto the things that are more important for the time being, like having your emergency fund funded, like making sure that you're maxing out on your retirement accounts. Or it might also be that you have a priority to pay off your mortgage. In any one of those scenarios, you can put your student loans, or you should put your student loans on the back burner, having your payments on those as low as possible, slow paying those so that you can focus that money on the other priorities that you have so that you can achieve your financial goals faster. In the details below, I will link the blog post that accompanies this video. In that article, we're going to have all the other calculators that we mentioned in this video as well. All right, everybody, I hope that you have found this information helpful. It is not always in your best interest to pay off your student loans as quickly as possible. Like us, we have treated Kurt's student loans differently than we're treating my student loans because we've done the work, we've gone through the analysis, and we have figured out what is going to work best for our family. Every single one of us has different financial circumstances, and there is no one solution that is going to be right for every single person. So use the tools that we talked about today. We hope that you come back to see us next week. If you haven't subscribed, would you please go ahead and do that so you get notifications of when we have new videos up. All right, everybody. Well, thank you so much for coming. We are so glad you were here. Bye.